You take a trade, it moves against you immediately, not far, just enough to trigger discomfort. Your system says hold. The structure hasn't broken. The stop is logical. Nothing has changed. But something inside you resists. Not because the trade is wrong, because you might be wrong. And that difference between the trade being wrong and you being wrong is everything. Here's what happens next. You start looking for evidence. Not evidence that the trade will work. Evidence that you were right to take it. Why? See? Price is holding support. Look, volume is decreasing on the pullback. This is just a retest. I knew it would do this. You're not analyzing the market anymore. You're building a case that protects one thing, your need to be right. Or this. The trade hits your stop. Clean stop, logical placement. The structure broke, the setup failed, but you don't accept it. That was manipulation. They hunted stops before the real move. I was right about the direction, just wrong about the entry. Notice what you're doing? You're separating you from the outcome. The trade lost, but you were still right. One more. You take a trade. It works. Hits your target. You bank the profit. But then, price continues. Way past your target. Keeps running. And instead of feeling good about the win, you feel frustrated. I knew it would go further. I should have held longer. I was right about the bigger move. You made money. But it doesn't feel like winning. Because being right about the full move matters more than the profit you actually captured. This is the mechanism. The addiction to being right. Not right about the trade. Right about you. Your intelligence. Your analysis. Your judgment. And once that need takes over, once being right becomes more important than being profitable, everything changes. You stop trading probabilities. You start trading identity. Let's map how this actually shows up in trading behavior. Vignette. 1. The validation search. You're in a trade. It's not moving the way you expected, not failing yet, not breaking structure, just not confirming your thesis as quickly as you thought it would. So you start searching. You open another chart. Check a different time frame. Let me see if the 15-minute is showing what I think it's showing. You scroll through your watch list. Look for correlated pairs. If this is really a dollar strength move, EUR should be dropping too. You check volume, check order flow, check sentiment indicators, but here's what you're not doing. You're not checking if the trade is still valid. You already know it is. The structure is fine. The setup hasn't failed. You're checking if you were right to take it. And here's the tell. When you find something that confirms your thesis, even something irrelevant, something that doesn't actually change the probability, you feel relief. Not because the trade is more likely to work now, because you feel validated. See, I was right. This is a dollar strength day. The market hasn't proven you right yet, but you've collected enough evidence to feel right. And that feeling temporarily satisfies the need. But notice what you're doing to your edge. You're spending mental resources on validation instead of observation. You're filtering information through, does this confirm me? Instead of what is actually happening. You're not managing the trade. You're managing your self-image. And the market doesn't care about your self-image. Vignette 2. The retroactive rightness you take a loss. The trade didn't work. Price broke structure. Stop got hit. Clean execution. The setup failed. It happens. But you can't leave it there. I was right about the bias, though. I was right about the level. Just got stopped out on the spike. I was right that it would reverse. I just wasn't in anymore. You're doing something strange here. You're salvaging rightness from the loss. The trade failed. But you were still correct. Your analysis was sound. Your thesis was valid. You just got unlucky, or stopped out early, or entered too soon. And here's why this is dangerous. Because now you don't learn from the loss. You don't examine what actually happened. You don't update your model. Because in your mind, you weren't wrong. You were right. But the outcome didn't reflect it. And that narrative, that separation between your judgment and the result, it keeps you stuck. Because if you were right, there's nothing to fix. If you were right, you just keep doing what you're doing. And the losses keep coming. The market doesn't grade on thesis. It doesn't give you partial credit for right about the direction. It gives you one signal, profit or loss. But you're operating in a different grading system, one where being right matters more than being profitable. Vignette 3, the profit that doesn't count. You take a trade, it works, hits your target, you exit, you made money, but price keeps going way past your target, and instead of feeling satisfied with the profit, you feel cheated, not by the market, by yourself. I knew it was going to run. I should have held longer. I was right about the bigger move. Why did I take profit so early? Here's what's happening. The win doesn't validate you because you didn't capture the full move. You made money, but you weren't fully right. And this reveals something critical about the addiction. It's not about the outcome. It's about the completeness of being right. Making 2R doesn't satisfy the need if you knew it would go to 5R. Being profitable doesn't matter if you weren't profitable enough to prove you were right about everything. The addiction isn't to winning. It's to being perfectly right. And the market never lets you be perfectly right. So the need never gets satisfied. Here's what happens when being right becomes more important than being profitable. Your perception of trading warps. Not obviously, but deeply. First distortion. You start to see the market as a judgment system. The market isn't neutral anymore. It's not just price moving based on order flow. It's a verdict on you. When price moves in your direction, validation. I was right. When price moves against you, threat. Am I wrong? Every tick becomes evidence in a case about your competence. And once you see the market that way, you can't trade it objectively anymore because objectivity requires neutrality, and you've made the market personal. Second distortion, you confuse prediction with edge. You start to believe that the value of a trade is in how accurately you predicted what would happen. I called that reversal perfectly. I knew it would retest before breaking out. I predicted this would happen 3 days ago. But here's what you're missing. Prediction accuracy doesn't equal profitability. You can predict correctly and still lose money. If you enter poorly, size incorrectly, or exit too early. You can predict incorrectly and still make money. If your system has edge and you execute it properly. The market doesn't reward prediction. It rewards execution. But when you're addicted to being right, you optimize for prediction accuracy instead of execution quality. You want to know what's going to happen, not to trade it profitably, to prove you can know. And that shift from how do I make money to how do I prove I know, that shift kills edge. Third distortion. You start to see disagreement as threat. Someone challenges your analysis. Another trader sees it differently. The market moves against your bias, and your response isn't curiosity. It's defense. No, you're wrong. Look at this level. You're not seeing the bigger picture. Just wait. I'll be proven right. You're not engaging with different perspectives to refine your understanding. You're defending against them. Because a different perspective isn't just alternative analysis. It's a challenge to your rightness. And this creates a terrible trap. The more you need to be right, the less you can learn. Because learning requires admitting you don't know. And admitting you don't know feels like admitting you're inadequate. So you stop learning. You stop updating. You stop integrating new information. Not because you're stubborn, because staying right feels safer than risking being wrong. Fourth distortion. You redefine what right means to protect the need. A trade fails. But you were right about the direction. A trade works but doesn't go as far as you thought. But you were right about the setup. Just wrong about the target. Price does exactly what you thought. 3 hours after you exited. See? I was right. Just early. Notice the pattern? You're always right, even when you're wrong, because you've built a definition of right that's flexible enough to survive any outcome. You've created a closed system, one where being right is guaranteed, as long as you keep redefining what being right means. And here's the strange part. Recognizing that you're doing this, seeing the pattern of redefinition clearly, doesn't stop it. Because the recognition itself can become another form of being right. See? I'm aware enough to catch myself doing this. I must be pretty sophisticated. The awareness becomes proof of adequacy, while the pattern continues unchanged. You're not trading anymore. You're defending. So why does this happen? Why do intelligent, capable traders become addicted to being right, even when it costs them money? Because the need to be right isn't about trading. It's about identity. Think about what being wrong actually means to most people. It's not just I made an incorrect assessment, it's I'm not as smart as I thought. I don't understand this as well as I believed. Maybe I'm not capable of doing this. Being wrong isn't a data point. It's a threat to self-concept. And your brain will do almost anything to avoid that threat, including sacrifice profit. This is why traders will hold losing trades far too long. Not because they think the trade will come back, but because closing it means admitting they were wrong. And as long as the position is open, the verdict is still pending. You're not wrong yet. You're just waiting to be proven right. This is why traders will revenge trade after a loss. Not because they see a valid setup, but because the loss made them feel wrong. And they need to be right again, immediately, to restore the self-image. The next trade isn't about edge. It's about redemption. This is why traders will overanalyze, over-research, over-prepare. Not because more analysis leads to better results, but because being thorough feels like being right. If you've analyzed every time frame, checked every indicator, considered every scenario, then you must be right, even if the trade loses. You were thoroughly right. The addiction persists because it works, not for making money, for protecting the ego. And for most traders, protecting the ego feels more urgent than making money. Because money is external. But ego? That's you. And you can't tolerate the possibility that you, the core you, might be inadequate. Let me show you what this addiction is actually protecting you from discovering. It's not protecting you from being wrong about the market. It's protecting you from being uncertain about yourself. Because here's the thing about trading. The market is probabilistic, which means you can do everything right and still lose. You can analyze perfectly, execute flawlessly, manage risk properly, and the trade still fails. Not because you were wrong, because probability doesn't guarantee outcomes on individual trials. That's how edge works. But if you accept that being right doesn't guarantee profit, then you lose the one thing you've been using to measure your adequacy. Because if being right doesn't equal winning, how do you know if you're good enough? How do you know if you're competent? How do you know if you belong here? And that's the question the addiction makes unnecessary. As long as you can be right, even in losses, you never have to confront the uncertainty of whether you're actually capable. You can always point to your analysis, your thesis, your prediction, and say, see, I was right. The outcome just didn't reflect it. Your competence stays intact. Your self-image stays protected. But here's what that protection costs you. You never develop actual competence. Because actual competence in trading isn't about being right. It's about executing edge consistently, regardless of outcome. It's about managing risk without needing validation. It's about accepting uncertainty without defending against it. And none of that develops while being right functions as adequacy assessment. The addiction to being right isn't about the market. It's about avoiding the discovery that competence in trading doesn't feel like being right. It feels like being uncertain and executing anyway. And that feeling, that sustained uncertainty without validation, that's what you're not willing to tolerate yet. Here's what happens if you let this addiction run unchecked. First, you optimize for the wrong variable. You start making decisions based on what will let me be right, instead of what has positive expectancy. You hold losers because closing them means admitting error. You exit winners early because you knew it wouldn't go further, and you'd rather be right about that than make more money. You skip valid setups because you're not certain enough to risk being wrong. You take invalid setups because you feel right about them. Every decision gets filtered through. Does this protect my rightness? And expectancy drains away with every filtered decision. Second, you become unteachable. Not because you're arrogant, because learning requires admitting you don't know. And admitting you don't know threatens the identity you've built around being right. Someone offers feedback, defense, a mentor suggests a different approach, resistance. The market shows you a pattern you missed, reframing to preserve your original thesis. You can't integrate new information because new information might reveal you were wrong about old information, and you can't tolerate being wrong. Third, your relationship with the market becomes adversarial. When the market moves against you, it's not just price movement, it's personal. The market is trying to prove you wrong. It's manipulated. It's hunting your stops. Because if the market is hostile, then your losses aren't about you being wrong. They're about external forces working against you. And that narrative preserves your rightness. But it also makes trading torture. Fourth, you plateau permanently. Your results stop improving, not because you lack knowledge, not because you lack discipline, but because improvement requires error recognition. And you've built a system, a psychological system, where you're never wrong, just unlucky, just early, just stopped out on manipulation. If you're never wrong, there's nothing to improve. And your equity curve reflects that. Flat, stuck, while you keep collecting evidence of how right you are. Fifth, you lose years, not to catastrophic blowups, to slow erosion. The edge leaks out through 1,000 small decisions, each one optimized for rightness instead of profitability. The learning stops because admitting ignorance feels like failure. The adaptation stops because changing your mind means you were wrong before. And time passes, months, years, and you're still arguing with the market about who's right. While the market doesn't care. It just keeps moving. And you keep watching your account go nowhere, while maintaining your certainty that you understand it all. So, where does that leave you? You understand the mechanism now, the addiction to being right. Not right about the market, right about you. You've seen how it shows up. The validation search, the retroactive rightness, the profit that doesn't count, because it doesn't prove you were completely correct. You understand why it persists, because protecting your self-image feels more urgent than protecting your capital. You understand what it costs: edge erosion, unteachability, years of stagnation. But understanding doesn't cure addiction. Seeing it doesn't stop it. Tomorrow you'll take a trade. It will move against you, and you'll start searching for evidence that you were right to take it. Not evidence that it's still valid. Evidence that you're still valid. And all of it will feel true because you've made being right elastic enough to survive any outcome. You can be right when you win, right when you lose, right when you break even. Always right. Never profitable. Because here's what you haven't faced yet. Competence in trading doesn't feel like being right. It feels like being uncertain, executing anyway, and being okay with not knowing if this specific trade will work. That tolerance, that ability to act without needing to be proven right, that's what separates traders who make money from traders who need validation. And the question isn't whether you see the addiction. You do. The question is, are you willing to trade without the validation of being right? Are you willing to execute without knowing? Are you willing to be wrong, actually deeply wrong about your analysis, and continue anyway? Because that tolerance, that's what trading actually requires. And I can't tell you how to build it. I can only tell you what it costs not to have it.